It's Debbie Potts, and I'm back with a new guest on the show to talk about how you can get stronger and more powerful as you age from the inside out.
Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey guys, it's Debbie, and I just wanted to give you a quick little message from one of our sponsors, Element. Element. It's spelled L-M-N-T, but pronounced Element. If you haven't heard about this, Element is a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. That means there's a lot of salt with no sugar, and it's formulated to help anyone with their electrolyte needs and is perfectly suited for those doing a keto, low carb, or paleo diet. And I think this is great for athletes, especially in the summertime and when you're training in warmer climates. Element contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. None of the junk, no sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers. That's it. I like the unsweetened one because the other flavors do have a little stevia, but stevia doesn't do well in my body. So I prefer the unsweetened Element, and I like the packets because I can throw them in my bike bag when I go on a long bike ride or when traveling, and I can just dump a packet in my water. And it keeps me so much more hydrated because remember, we don't sweat out water, we sweat out minerals. So check it out. You've got a nice little gift from them if you use our discount code Drink Element. I'll put the link in the show notes. But using the code Low Carb Athlete, you get a free gift with purchase. You get a free Element sample pack with any order when you order with Low Carb Athlete on our special URL code. So support the podcast, support Element. It's backed by science and we love what they're doing. So try it out. Hey, it's Debbie Potts, and I'm talking to someone new today that I reached out to have a podcast with him on his purpose, his why, and to talk about the vertical diet. So if you know our guest, Stan, stay tuned and learn more about him. And if you don't know him, you're about to get to know someone new with a big mission. So let's wait for our guest today. And I'm excited to learn more about his story and the vertical diet and how we can get stronger as we age, as that's my mission, to improve my aging process. Hopefully you are on the same mission, living our best life, our second half of our life, and thriving as we age and not struggling. So thanks for joining me. Let's talk to Stan. Okay, guys, I have Stan on the show today to help us get stronger as we age. So thanks for coming on and joining us endurance athletes who probably need to do less cardio and lift heavier weights and eat more protein. And I thought you might be the person to talk to about this.
Thank you. Yeah, my experience with endurance athletes goes back a long time. I worked with the University of Oregon track team back in the early 1990s, and as well as the football players. So I've had a lot of exposure to that over the years. And of course, worked with numerous CrossFit national champions as well.
Now, last side note, is CrossFit, would you say more endurance, or is it more, it seems more high intensity interval training and heavy lifting, but what do you think?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. They're trying to challenge them on both ends of the spectrum. That's, I think, the whole CrossFit mantra.
A little bit of
I
all.
think they probably do it better than most.
So let's start with what I always like to ask people what their why is. What do you do and why do you do it?
Well, I've been a competitive athlete and a personal trainer for over 30 years. I started competing in 1988, and I was studying exercise science at the University of Oregon. And I've worked as a coach. I was a high school soccer coach. I coached the University of Oregon football and track athletes. And while I was competing, and I used my exercise science background and my personal experience and 25 years of actually competing to just help all of my clients. I think people know me for some of the famous athletes I've trained, most certainly. John Jones, UFC heavyweight champion, a lot of NFL football players like Lane Johnson from the Philadelphia Eagles, and many of the world's strongest men, Brian Shaw, Hafthor Bjornsson, Mountain from Game of Thrones, and the current world's strongest man, Mitchell Hooper, who just won the Arnold Classic. And but that's a very small part of what I do. I've been coaching and training and working out of box gyms and working on my own, going all the way back to college and shortly thereafter. And so the vast majority of my clients are really just dad bods and soccer moms, just Gen Pop trying to, feel better. And so I've been able to improve through personal experience and through a culmination of all of the things that I've learned working with great coaches and great athletes, and then partnering with Dr. Damon McCune, who's a PhD RDN, was director of dietetics at UNLV, to try and make sure that we were definitely scientific in our recommendations, because we've had no shortage of research in the last 10 years in particular to help guide us along the way. And so my why is that I think that a lot of people, particularly athletes, are successful in spite of themselves, and that things could be easier. And I always say, if I knew then what I know now, I would have been able to accomplish more at a younger age and maybe had a longer career. But now it's really just helping folks. It's what I do full time with the books and the ebooks and the meal prep company, and my online coaching is just help people achieve their goals and talk about some of the myths. I always felt as though social media was going to develop into the kind of resource that would provide us more and more good information. But unfortunately, it's been quite popular in providing us a lot of bad information too, and it's hard to sift through all of the noise.
So that's a good place to start. What are some top 3 myths that you get frustrated with that you see reoccurring on social media?
Well, I call it the shiny object syndrome. That a lot of my athletes will see something on Instagram and want to know about it. I think if it were the top 3, boy, it's so hard because there's so many, but that there's some magic diet program. There's certainly very sensible recommendations for athletes for performance, but in terms of weight loss, there's a lot of people that have talked about things such as intermittent fasting and keto diets, et cetera. And it's not my goal here today to shit on anybody's diet, for sure. But the idea that one is any better than the other just hasn't panned out in terms of weight loss and general health. That's probably the big one, is thinking that there's one best path, and there's not. Yeah. And then in terms of training, I think we went through a phase here where we did a lot of functional fitness, where people did I kind of tried to join together strength and cardio, and it just, you don't get the best of either from that kind of thing. They're very different disciplines, and they should be trained very differently. And so we'll certainly get into that today, but that's got to be a big one for sure.
Yeah.
And then I think, on the supplement realm, I think that we've exaggerated the meaningfulness of a lot of different supplements that may provide a small benefit, but generally speaking, it's minimal. There's only a couple that can provide a measurable performance benefit, and even at that, it pales in comparison to the big rocks, the basics, the sleeping, eating, and training.
Yeah, for sure. I know people I do personalized coaching myself and testing, and it's funny how many people take so many supplements because they listen to something, read an article, listen to a podcast, and then they end up having just all this stuff that just okay, which do you really need? What are you absorbing?
And particularly when you listen to, say, Andrew Huberman podcast or a Rhonda Patrick podcast, they're I think some of the folks that get a little overexcited, and I'm not by any means trying to insult either one of them. I think people want there to be something that helps you more than it does. And so they'll use plausible mechanisms of action, but they'll make these giant logical leaps into outcome recommendations. And it's just not as meaningful. And as they've evolved, even more recently, we've seen, particularly Dr. Rhonda Patrick's, I think there's a list going around of all the supplements she's recommended over the years, and it would choke a horse. And they tend to, over time, learn to pull back a little bit on, I think, how much they emphasize those things that they used to exaggerate the benefits for, and a host of other things. And again, I'm not here to insult other people. I'm just saying that it can be distracting for the average consumer of information who doesn't have the time like we do to actually consult with professionals, research, and have a better idea of what's really going to matter.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I have said that on the show. We won't get into it, but I do find it important people realize that all these top leader influencers in our community, they're giving their supplement protocols and exercise and everything that's for them. And it's not one size fits all, as I think you're saying as well, is that we need to personalize it and figure out what that person needs, and not to say, okay, this person takes all this, let's copy their protocol. It's not what we want to do necessarily.
No, and I'm not anti-supplement. I used to distribute for Beverly International going back as far as the early 90s. And I've taken plenty of supplements over the years. And I have like most people, I have a cabinet full of unfinished supplements that I started with a great deal of excitement, enthusiasm, but the lack of results. And I was one person who, over the years, I've had well over 100 blood tests throughout my career, and that's conservatively speaking, sometimes on a monthly basis when I was at the peak of my competitive career. And I would try and measure, although that's hard to do because there's so many factors involved, there's so many different supplements. Try and measure and see if there was any impact on biomarkers or performance. I was big on tracking everything from sleep to weight to body composition to performance metrics, and as well as my biomarkers from blood tests. And if I didn't see or feel a significant difference, the challenge there is that a lot of those things may take more time. But we have a lot of literature now to help people, and I never want to discourage anyone from using something. And in the questionnaire I use for clients, I say, what do you feel works for you in terms of supplements? Because I don't ever want to nocebo someone and tell them that, well, there's really no evidence to suggest that's of any benefit, when in fact they believe it is, and the placebo effect is real. And so I'll leave those things alone, presuming they don't have significant research suggesting that they can cause adverse effects.
Mm-hmm. So as we are getting older, so the 50 and plus second half of our life, I'm trying to help us all learn different tips and tricks to improve the aging process, so we're thriving as we get older, not struggling. And as my mom's 82 suddenly, and my dad passed away a year and a half ago, I really feel the importance of us focusing on creating our future self and working on that now at age 50, whatever age you are, but really focusing on how am I going to live my best life when I'm retired and living life, hopefully traveling around the world, or whatever you like to visualize yourself doing when you're 80 years old. I just think it's important to take that ownership of our health in our own hands now and figure out, okay, here are the tools, what I should be working on now. So what would you say we should start doing first?
It's multifactorial. Mm-hmm. I hesitate to prioritize things into some hierarchy. Obviously, sleep is hugely important. 7+ hours of quality sleep. If you have apnea, then you should get diagnosed and utilize a CPAP or lose weight. That's a big one. That's what I start with. It's the foundation upon which I believe everything else sits. Mm-hmm. And next is going to be, I think, body composition in general. And this would kind of go into both diet and exercise. And, we see in the literature that 95% of health benefits are realized simply from weight loss itself for those people who are carrying excess body fat, if not suffering from obesity, irrespective of diet, as much as I hate to say it, because I'm pretty picky about the kinds of foods that I eat and I recommend for my clients. But if someone's overweight, the first and foremost, you want to lose that fat. That's a very inflammatory process, and the extra weight is going to bear heavy on your joints. We see a lot of that with knee surgeries and hips, et cetera. It's primarily based on excess body weight. So those are the big, probably the big top two. And when I talk about body composition and losing fat, I'm specific about saying losing fat because losing weight could entail losing muscle as well. What we've learned, what we thought for many years is that your metabolism declined as you aged. And now we tend to understand that between 20 and north of 50, somewhere up to 60, there's not a significant decline in your BMI and or your BMR, your basal metabolic rate. What we've seen is that our activity decreases, and particularly the activity that involves resistance training to maintain lean muscle tissue and bone density. So that's one of the biggest things as people age. Get them sufficient sleep, make sure that they're not overweight, and the way to battle the loss of muscle tissue, what we refer to as sarcopenia as we age, is going to be both getting sufficient protein in the diet, which we seem to think that somewhere between 1.2 and 1.6 grams per kilogram, so about 0.8 grams per pound. And of course, that differs depending on your lean mass. If you're significantly overweight or suffer from obesity, you can't eat 0.8 grams per pound. You maybe 0.8 grams per pound of lean weight or goal weight, we could call it. So I want to give people a reference so they can consume enough protein. And then it's exercise. Seems one of the first things we lose as we age is our speed. Just our nervous system tends not to react as well, and we lose our explosiveness. And then secondarily, we lose strength, and then we lose muscle tissue. And so having a speed component as we age is pretty important. People generally, as they get over, I don't know, say 40 years old, probably never sprint again. And it might be recommended not to just run out and sprint because it's very dynamic and you could get injured. But just little things for speed that people could do would be maybe some banded work so you wouldn't expose yourself to injury, like a box jump. Jump up, but don't jump down. Those are things that I incorporate into all the programs for people in their 40s and 50s. I start with a little bit of speed. Another one is a band-assisted pogo, we call it. You hook a band over a chin-up bar, and you can put the other portions under your arms, and you do little jumps, little hops. It'd be kind of like a jump rope or hopping. And that just kind of helps you with your speed, just short ground contact time. Or even getting on maybe for somebody who hasn't done anything like that in a long time, get on an assault bike and just spin really fast. And just as opposed to just doing a steady state cardio. I'm just talking for 10 seconds, just something very fast. I think the assault bike would probably be the best transition for people who aren't training very hard or haven't been training. Be a nice transition. So, and then next is going to be some sort of loading, particularly axial loading through the spine. That doesn't mean you have to squat or deadlift, but maybe just carry something heavy. And if you can load the spine, then you're going to get a significant benefit for not just your bone mineral density of your spine, but also your hips and the like. So some sort of resistance training. And I've always said the best exercise is the one you'll do, but the caveat to that is it providing the right stimulus? And for people as they age, my dad's 94. He's lived with me for many years now with macular degeneration, and he's used the walker, but I have bands hooked up to where he can do band resistance exercise. And I have a recumbent bike, so he can sit in the recumbent bike and he's moving his legs through a range of motion he might not otherwise experience walking around on a walker. His knees never bend to 90 degrees. His hips never bend to 90 degrees, getting up and out of a chair, And so the bike not only provides him some fluidity of movement and some blood flow, but it gives him a greater range of motion. And then if he has the strength to increase the tension a little bit, and we just do maybe a little short 10, 15 seconds, then he can rest for a little while and do it again. And that kind of thing elevates the heart rate, takes his larger muscles through a greater range of motion, which helps with his blood sugar control. As you know, muscles will take up glucose from the bloodstream in the absence of need of insulin. So we utilize all of those techniques with him, with the bands, etc. If you're a little younger in your 50s, certainly you should be lifting something, maybe even a trap bar deadlift. And then there's any kind of equipment at the gym, whether it's a seated chest press or something that's comfortable that you enjoy that you'll do consistently is probably the biggest hurdle that most people run into. They pour themselves headlong into a program that's such a huge departure from their current lifestyle, or it's not enjoyable and they just don't sustainably do it for a long period of time.
Yeah, I see that a lot. Or people think that they're going to need to spend an hour or more, so they don't have that hour time. They don't go to the gym, or they don't think of that. They could do something at home, like walk around with 2 buckets and fill it with rocks. Farmers
exactly. Carry. Yeah, the farmers carry. Love the farmers carry. Yep.
Yeah. So, we're working a lot of talking about metabolic health in our industry and longevity markers. And you hear a lot of people saying we need to focus on improving our VO2 max, the biggest marker of longevity. But I keep saying it's not just VO2 max, it's the metabolic health, but the muscle health. So do you look at the whole picture, looking at different lab markers and helping people figure out their plan, as you just went over the strength and sprint training, but I didn't hear you say zone 2 training and improving your VO2 max. So what's your opinion on that?
Well, the American Heart Association just recently released a statement saying that resistance training is equivalent to cardiovascular training for mortality risk. Having said that, they also said the combination of the both provides an added benefit. And I think that, again, I hate to do the hierarchy, but I think that the resistance training takes the priority because it provides other benefits. It provides an equivalent benefit to cardiovascular training in terms of mortality risk, but it provides the additional benefit of the bone mineral density maintenance and the lean muscle tissue maintenance, which are both pretty significant markers of long-term, of lifespan and health span. So what I recommend, because it's sustainable, I haven't had much luck giving clients 40 minutes on the treadmill 3 days a week or 4 days a week, because again, it's not enjoyable or sustainable, and there's barriers to entry to get in your car and drive to the gym and all of that. So I do these 3 10-minute walks for a multitude of reasons. Take a 10-minute walk after each meal daily, and it raises your heart rate. It gets you, it's tended to be brisk. It's not a jog or a run, but it helps with digestion. It helps with blood sugar control, which can be huge, especially as we age. For those people with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, which is 40% of the population, 70% are overweight or obese. And so these walks are like little exercise snacks. They're more sustainable. Mm-hmm. They're twice as effective as metformin for preventing or reversing type 2 diabetes because of the way that they blunt what we call postprandial glycemia, the elevation of blood sugar and the duration, what we refer to as the area under the curve of insulin elevation. Because as mentioned earlier, the muscles, when you're taking that brisk walk after a meal, your muscles will take up the glucose without the need of the increase of insulin, which helps with blood pressure control as well, and has a host of benefits. So we recommend 30 minutes a day of brisk walking, and that adds into your daily step count, of course. That counts as both, which we like to keep north of. I think you get a satiety benefit when you get north of, say, 5,000, 6,000 steps a day. And if you can do more, great. But again, it's, compliance is the science. Let's do more than you're currently doing. And now I am cautious to say that more exercise doesn't equal more weight loss. And if you dive into some really aggressive cardio program, that's a huge departure from your current exercise habits. You can actually get what we call a compensation effect. I think it's the research suggests it's a constrained energy model of obesity or of weight loss, whereby the more you exercise, the likelihood is increased that you're going to sit more and eat more because you're tired. And so we see kind of a left pocket, right pocket sort of exchange. As your exercise activity goes up, your non-exercise activity goes down, and you're just sitting more and you're tired, and then you just eat more throughout the day. It increases hunger as opposed to satiating you. And so I'm cautious about how much cardio I prescribe. And I obviously, as much as an individual will enjoy and will do sustainably. If you love to, play pickleball, go do that. If you like to Go to a Zumba class, go do that. But as long as you'll do it consistently is what matters most. So that's kind of talking all around the topic. That I recommend the 3 10-minute walks, resistance training at least twice, hopefully 3 times a week. And again, like you said, it doesn't have to be more than 30 minutes. You can easily do a full body training session in 30 minutes, just walking around from machine to machine. And that would be my recommendation. And I know that Dr. Peter T and others have talked quite glowingly about Zone 2 and the duration and the intensity of that. And I certainly think that's a lofty goal. But I think what we discover, if you look closely at the research for longevity, is that people who have a particularly high VO2 max, who are living longer, or a lot of strength, say in the grip test, which is the proxy for overall strength, it speaks more to the fact of a cumulative body of work throughout your adult years than it does about any specific metric. Meaning, if your VO2 max is high, you're probably very active. And if your strength is good, then you're probably also have been very active for a long time. And that is the key, I think, is just to make sure that you have a sustainable, active lifestyle that includes a sufficient amount of cardio and strength. And more isn't better. I don't believe that. The pursuit of that, I think, can be very discouraging, and you get diminishing returns. And so people have families, they have jobs, they have, other interests that they want to pursue. And I'm reticent to assign them something that eats into those other, enjoyable lifestyle activities that probably will give them a minimal return on their investment beyond what is necessary. And again, Peter's been good about saying this, going from the bottom quartile to, the second quartile gives you far more benefits in terms of lifespan and health span than going from the second quartile to the top quartile. That, again, the diminishing returns, you keep training harder and harder and harder, and you get less and less benefit from that over time. That's what I'm suggesting. And it's less sustainable and enjoyable.
For sure. I have lots of comments throughout all that. But I go back to one comment I thought I had is yesterday I did an example. I had my heart rate strap on when I was at the gym lifting weights, but I was doing legs and doing different exercises, with the sandbag and some kettlebells. And my heart rate was 120s, 130s, hit 140. And I was like, well, if I didn't have a lot of time and I wasn't a biker and a runner and swimmer, this would be enough. I mean, I'm getting my heart rate up where I need to get the cardiovascular benefits, and I'm getting my strength. And so really, I can see I don't need to go do another 30, 45 minutes on the treadmill at Zone 2. I'm getting that at the same time I'm doing my strength training in a little bit.
I would suggest you don't have to, and you already made the distinction that if you're not an athlete with a specific goal that requires better cardio, which is, I'm cautious to always talk about who's the audience.
Yes.
The 99% of the population that we just spoke to, or the 1% of athletes who screech bloody murder every time I suggest that doing more cardio is probably doesn't provide a significant additional benefit to the vast majority of people.
Yeah. And we're probably the 1% listening is the endurance athlete doing too much cardio, and they're not doing enough strength training because they think they run hills or bike hills that is enough strength, and they swim, that's enough resistance training. That I'm trying to say, hey, we need to focus on muscle health and metabolic health as we age, and doing the sprint training I keep hearing more and more about, instead of we already know how to do Zone 2 in our community. Endurance athletes don't need more time in Zone 2, 4 hours a week or whatever the suggestions are. But, especially women, Dr. Stacy Sims, I've read a lot of her research showing for women might need even more than men time in doing those 10, 30-second sprints. And as you said, we lose speed and we need more fast twitch muscle fibers. And I find personally, that's what my focus is, just getting stronger, getting faster, more powerful as I age, because I can tell that difference, even though I was never really a fast twitch muscle fiber athlete. I can go forever, Forrest Gump. So I can tell the difference as I age personally.
Yeah. And again, strength is the same thing. I work with a lot of athletes, and if they can do a double body weight squat, they're strong enough. And I don't suggest that them getting stronger than that is going to significantly improve their sports performance. But then there's those people who struggle with a single body weight squat, and they could benefit from increasing their strength for a number of reasons. One, of course, is injury prevention. That a lot of that repetitive strain that comes from logging so many miles. And you could decrease fatigue by swimming or doing bike in addition to your running, of course. But the increasing the strength of the muscles is going to help with injury prevention. And it absolutely will help with performance, just specifically with runners. The stride length is going to increase with better strength. And that's going to, of course, help bring your times down. Now, I'm cautious that you have to maintain a good strength to weight ratio. So I'm not talking about bodybuilding and packing on mass. I've worked with fighters all the way up to, like I mentioned earlier, John Jones, the UFC champion. And the last thing you want to do is put a bunch of unnecessary weight on someone that has an endurance goal. But you can get stronger without gaining weight. It's a nervous system adaptation primarily. And you just have to train with the heavier loads. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to pack on a whole bunch of muscle. I wish that were the case. If it was that easy. So we designed the program to very specifically address strength, separate from cardio. Those are two completely different stimulus and adaptation processes. And so we'll even separate those workouts. We won't put them together. And we'll specifically train strength with those lower repetition, heavier weight movements, say 75 to 85% of your 1 rep max for sets of 5. And we'll train endurance by itself in a different workout. So that's how we kind of, I know they say that the interference effect isn't that relevant to the vast majority of people, but when we're talking about the 1%, there's most certainly an interference effect to be considered. Sprinters and marathon runners have two completely different bodies and different performance metrics. And so those things should be trained separately.
As I've lived down here in North San Diego almost 3.5 years, I guess almost 4 years coming up, I found the best sport for longevity markers to do all we're talking about. You need strength, you need agility, the balance, the quickness, sprint is surfing, cold water, nature. You watch those guys because you have to be lying down, paddling in cold water and time in salty water, sunshine, and get all those benefits. But then to watch them lie on a surfboard and then hop up really fast. And then you have to balance. And then, it's a quick sprint, catch a wave, and you're back down, recover. And to have the mobility, like my quads are always so tight I don't even think I could get down and up like that. And so my own theory is that that's like the best sport to keep being able to do as you get older.
Yeah.
So many benefits.
I'm not much of a surfer. I tried a couple of times in Cabo and it was embarrassing. Again, I just carry around too much mass. I sink. I'm still 240 pounds, and throughout most of my career, I was 275 to 290 in there. So I have a lot of admiration for people who can do those things. I think effort is important, like you said. It's the harder things seem to work better. And the caveat to that is that you don't want to accumulate too much fatigue in a given workout, because it's more important that you can string together some consecutive workouts and progress than it is that you crush yourself in any one particular workout.
Mm-hmm. So when you're doing the lifting part of the workout, you're doing cardiovascular sprints or something another day, not the same, not doing a 2 a day, but you're doing one focused workout per day.
If the time was there, I would do that. In cases where I would say I wouldn't do the endurance stuff with strength training, but you can do the speed first. You can do some box jumps. One of my favorites is an overspeed treadmill because it's pretty low fatigue and it's a really good stimulus for the nervous system. We've seen extraordinary results from that.
Treadmill?
It's just any treadmill that the overspeed treadmill in particular can go faster than you. And most treadmills in the gym go up to 12.5 miles an hour. The curved one is still kind of limited by your ability. The overspeed treadmill kind of it goes faster than you can go. And so you're really just trying to keep up. And that really gets your nervous system firing. It's kind of like overloading with weights. You lift a little heavier weight, that you can handle, and gradually you start to get stronger. With the overspeed, it helps us. Plus, there's a handlebar to grab onto
I visualize George Jetson. This is how old I am. If people ever watched a Jetsons cartoon when they're kids, like go underneath the treadmill, I'd fall off of that for sure.
Yeah, but you could start a workout with speed and then do your strength subsequent to that. And the speed training doesn't have to take a whole lot of energy or fatigue or your carbohydrate resources or your creatine phosphate resources. You could just do some brief sprints, some brief box jumps just to maintain that explosiveness, and then go into your force production exercises, whether it be, we like to use box squats, lower fatigue movements for athletes so that they have the energy to do their other activities, their sport specific stuff.
So that kind of goes into the second half of the conversation, nutrition, nutrient timing, the vertical diet, eating before workout or not eating, what to eat during, if anything, and after. So what is a vertical diet?
Well, the vertical diet is intended to be both information and execution. It's not just nutrition. We kind of talked about the fact that it's hydration and sleep and blood testing, and I have blood pressure quick fix, blood sugar quick fix, cholesterol. So it addresses a lot of the health problems. But when we get to athletes, there are some specific things, and they're pretty consistent with the International Society of Sports Nutrition's recommendation. Obviously, calories are king. If you're going to be training hard, you need to be able to fuel that workload, or you're potentially going to lose muscle tissue and decrease your performance. And then secondarily is protein, getting sufficient protein.
Yep.
Don't know if I lost you there.
Yeah.
Second is getting sufficient protein. And there's been lots of talk recently about how much that is and how many meals you need to get it. And about 1.6 grams per pound seems to provide all the stimulus necessary. If you're training super hard, you might go up to 1.6 grams per kilogram, about 0.8 grams per pound. I generally go in about a gram per pound. Why not? You might get a small additional benefit, gram per pound of protein per body weight. And the International Society of Sports Nutrition recommends at least 3 feedings. They prefer 4 because there's no mechanism to store protein in the body. And in the absence of protein, obviously, you're not going to be able to build or repair muscle tissue. I know we just had a recent study saying if you ate 100 grams of protein in one meal, that it would slowly release itself over many hours. It was a casein protein. It really had to do with the fact that the rate at which the protein was being digested and go through your system was slowed down significantly enough, so you would be able to benefit from that on an ongoing basis. Not everybody eats casein protein every meal, so we still recommend 4 evenly spaced feedings. Protein's not the only macronutrient that you're focused on. And then after that, you want sufficient fats to be able to help with sleep, to be able to help with hormones, to be able to help with ADE and K absorption. And interestingly enough, the research on fats suggests that as long as you're above about 60 grams a day, you probably won't see any decrements in any of those markers. I recommend a little more than that as a cushion. And usually it's about a 2-to-1 protein to fat ratio. So if I'm consuming, 160 grams of protein, I'd consume about 80 grams of fat. That's kind of where I set it. Now, the rest are carbohydrates, particularly when we're talking about athletes, to fuel their performance. And it doesn't just help with fueling performance, but it also helps decrease muscle tissue breakdown, which there's muscle protein synthesis, and then there's muscle protein breakdown. Mm-hmm. And carbohydrates seem to help, particularly not just with training, but post-workout with preventing muscle tissue breakdown or at least slowing it. And it obviously fuels performance. I think we used to believe that the carbohydrates, your glycogen was like a gas tank, and you could drive your car just as fast on a half a tank as you could on a full tank. But in fact, carbohydrates aren't stored evenly throughout your body. The first source of carbohydrates that's depleted is those in the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is the immediate source that actually helps release calcium channel ions, which triggers your muscle contraction and relaxation, your tropomyosin muscle contraction and relaxation. So those are depleted first. And so thinking that you have to completely deplete your carbohydrates in order to have a decrement in performance is not true. If you don't have sufficient carbohydrates, then you are going to experience some contraction relaxation impairment from just not having enough glycogen in your system for your training. So we do believe that the carbohydrates are pretty critical. Obviously, they're utilized for anaerobic training in particular. And we even, you talked about Stacy Sims' research for endurance athletes. She's recommending every 15 or 20 minutes that you take in carbohydrates throughout a long bout of exercise, hour and a half, certainly 2 hours or more. We do that with, athletes in soccer games and football games, et cetera. We want them taking in some sort of solution that includes water, a little bit of salt, and a little bit of carbohydrates all throughout that endurance program. We see the gels and stuff like that. And Stacy talks about some of the problems with those as far as the percentage of carbohydrates for the solution. Get too much sugar, too high a percentage of carbohydrate, and it's going to cause some gastric distress, and it won't be absorbed as efficiently into the bloodstream. Same thing would be true of too much salt in that mixture. Same would be true of just water. They're not very efficiently. It's more efficiently absorbed through that sodium glucose transporter if it's the right concentration. And Stacy did a fantastic job of describing that, Stacy Sims. And so the carbs are the rest, meaning if a rather sedentary person wouldn't need very many carbs on top of their proteins and fats. Those stay pretty constant. But a CrossFitter or a 2-a-day trainer or somebody who's engaged in an actual competition are going to need to take in significantly more on a regular basis. So they might need 4, 5, 6, 700 grams of carbs a day just to fuel their workload and their existing muscle tissue and body weight. And so that's the only variable, I would say. I get the protein pretty much stays constant, the fats pretty much stay constant, and then I move the carbs around. And then as far as timing goes, yes, you can load about 60% of your day's carbs in the meal 2 hours before and shortly after your workout. That is sensible. It provides a minimal additional benefit. But the foundation, the macros foundation, probably the bigger things that we just talked about are the major things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of great tips in there. I think it's important to talk about nutrition and timing, and that it is the nutrient density and strategic carb timing we talk about for athletic performance. So if you are trying to do an intense workout, if it's heavy strength training or just sprint training, a key quality workout, and then going longer, that carbs are not evil. It's just more the choices of the foods that we're eating. If it's a bunch of bagels and muffins and scones, you think you can eat whatever you want because you are exercising versus fueling your body with good quality sources of carbohydrates, I think is what I find has happened for a long time in the endurance sports and just workout world itself. I go to the gym, I see all these protein bars for sale, and they're a bunch of crap. They're like Snickers bars and, all this, they have gummy worms and stuff like that are all candy, and their ingredient list is filled with foreign items. So nutrition quality, I'm sure you talk about too. It's not like, what type of carbohydrates would you choose?
Yeah, very next on the list, we try and go over the types. With the proteins, we use lean proteins from a variety of sources. We like to see a little bit of red meat in there, particularly for women, for the iron and B12 and zinc. And it's very common that we see anemia, in the female triad with female distance athletes in particular. And so we have to be cautious about getting them enough iron. And so we do keep some red meat in there. Typically, they'll just eat the egg whites, and the egg has the choline. It has the biotin for skin, hair, and nails. So we like to keep at least one yolk in there. Dairy is huge. Stu Phillips up at McMaster University just was recently talking about the research suggesting that dairy is not only better for population-wide in terms of body composition, but also for performance. And it's not a protein issue. If you compare a comparable amount of protein from another source, it seems to be a dairy benefit. And so we certainly put dairy in there, at least 3 servings a day for women. Again, the calcium very important, but for performance benefits for everyone. If we wanted to speculate about the mechanism, we could say it was related to IGF-1, but we've seen outcome trials to show that, regardless of what the mechanism might be, that we see better performance with dairy. So we definitely keep dairy in there. I like yogurt because it's a fermented food. And we saw in the Sonnenberg trials out of Stanford that fermented foods improved the gut microbiome of 100% of the participants. Whereas increased fiber intake was kind of broken up into thirds. A third benefited, a third got worse, and a third maintained the same. So it's kind of individualistic in that regard. But it probably isn't because of the probiotics. We really haven't seen a very convincing benefit to that for, that's generalizable across the population. It seems like there's specific probiotics that might benefit some people under some circumstances, but it's hard to put our finger on the benefits of that. So the fermentation. So I use yogurt a lot. Milk, if you can tolerate it. Again, that's going to be a lactose tolerance issue as to dose and the like. So we certainly do that, and legumes for those people who and rice and whole grains for those people who want to get more vegetable sources. And then salmon at least twice a week for the omega-3s, and so that kind of. I just wanted to throw all my proteins out there to just talk about a variety of them and the purposes for those. Women in particular, again, tend to demonize red meat. They demonize dairy. They demonize fruit. They demonize the egg yolk. They demonize
there's nothing
salt.
to eat for us.
Right. And it's tragic, especially in the bodybuilding figure physique bikini industry. You watch all of these, again, the female triad and a host of other problems that result from nutrient deficiencies. The fats are mostly in the proteins that you eat. They're in the meat, they're in the eggs, but if you're going to add additional fats, you want to look more towards monounsaturates if you can. I usually don't worry about saturated fats unless I've got somebody who's having significant elevated LDL or that they've I'm trying to say in addition to the blood or just suffer from high cholesterol or they're significantly overweight. And so now we get to carbs, and the reason that I'll minimize saturated fat for those people trying to gain weight or have high LDL is because we see that it advances NAFLD at a quicker rate than other food sources, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So at least twice the rate of carbohydrates, you'll see a progression of NAFLD. When you compare high saturated fat intake as compared to carbohydrates. So now the carbs, you're right. We build a foundation of high potassium rich carbohydrates first. That would be a potato. It's twice the potassium of banana. That would be fruit, a host of, I kind of like the low sugar fruits, the berries and the oranges. It's going to be some dairy, obviously, is going to give you some carbohydrates as well. Whole grains, depending on how much you can tolerate. Some people are challenged by how much of that they can tolerate before they start getting bloating and stuff. We do see a lot of athletes suffer from IBS or symptoms like that, just a lot of bloating and discomfort and digestion, in which case we'll start selecting more foods off of the low FODMAP menu, FODMAP, fermentable oligo-di, monosaccharides, and polyols. And that's not to suggest that that's a permanent solution or that you have to exclusively use those, but you should be careful that those items that are high FODMAP items, how much of them you consume. And so you want to use lower FODMAP foods for your majority of your carbohydrate consumption if you're having trouble with digestion and gas and bloating. And once we get past building that foundation with the high potassium rich foods and sufficient fiber, now it becomes an issue of how much carbohydrate do you need to maintain your performance or your workload or your body mass. And with large athletes, football players, Lane Johnson's 330 pounds playing two-a-days in the NFL. If I don't give him enough calories, he'll lose weight, which impacts his performance. And so now I'm choosing some simpler carbs. Now he's white rice primarily is what we start throwing at them at that point, just to fill the gap because it's easy to consume a lot of it. It's pretty easy to digest, and it helps us meet that calories are king requirement that kind of hovers over all of this.
Wow. Yeah. Lots of good information. I'm interviewing Dr. William Davis in a couple of weeks. I don't know if you read his Wheat Belly book years ago, and then he has a book out a couple of years ago called The Super Gut that I'm reading again. But the yogurt, you're talking about SIBO yogurt he makes. I just made a batch this morning, but it's that yogurt air quote, because it's not really yogurt. It's just fermented food. Your probiotics are just 38 hours. You get billions of them versus the store-bought yogurt. And it's so easy to make, except for my husband said this batch smelled funny. So maybe we won't be eating this one, but if you make it right, it's good.
Yeah.
So what are you working on now? You've got a lot of books out. You have this vertical diet food delivery service. Tell us a little bit about that.
We have a nationwide meal prep where we make the food for people. Compliance is the science, and we find that our athletes are better able to comply. Well, even, the general population, you got police, fire, and ambulance, you've got real estate agents, you got people who are, nurses who work long hours and are on the go. And when you have your meals prepared, whether, we do it or you do it, it doesn't matter to me. It's just that the fact is that it's one of the biggest indicators of success is in terms of compliance is your ability to have what you need when you need it, and that you aren't going astray and stopping at Carl's Jr. or just skipping a meal altogether. Yeah. And so we do a nationwide meal prep where we make meals for people and deliver them nationwide. And then the vertical diet is an ebook and a paperback at Barnes and Nobles. It was the #1 new release and on Amazon. And it has all the information we've discussed with much more. It's 260 pages now with over 200 references to peer-reviewed published research. And so we try and make sure that we're providing, solid evidence-based information. And then you're right. I'm writing a book. The current one I'm just wrapping up is The World's Strongest Diet for people who are trying to gain weight. And then Vertical Kids is the one that is on the horizon to help, I say, from conception to college. We're trying to help parents navigate their children through all those choices.
That's huge. Good for you. So one last question that I think important one, because I've been doing rabbit hole podcasts on Thursdays about different topics as you're talking about getting stronger. And to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, we want to hit that 30 to 50 grams of protein. You said 3 meals to 4 meals a day. So what I'm trying to say to people that I gather that having 10 grams here, and then I'm going to have a bar with 20 grams. And if it doesn't have the right amino acid profile, that's probably not helping us with the MPS, is it? We have to get the right dose.
It's not. Now, getting enough protein, hitting your total protein for the day is the most important. And then bookending your workout is probably second on that list, just to make sure you have something going into and coming out of your training within, let's say, a 5-hour window, a couple hours before, a couple hours after. Probably next on the list, assuming you can get your total daily grams of protein from 1 meal or 2 meals. But that seems to be the biggest problem with the OMAD, the 1 meal a day, or even intermittent fasting, is that people just aren't consuming their daily total amount of protein. So they might have to eat more. They might have to supplement with a shake. I'm a big fan of food first because, like you mentioned, the micronutrients and the fiber and the satiety benefit that you just don't get from shakes. But generally speaking, if you ask people, and I often do, how many meals do you normally eat a day, or would you like to eat a day? And that just has to do with your schedule and what helps satiate you, which is the single most important factor for weight loss, is because as soon as you get hungry, you're going to lose that battle. It's just willpower is not a good strategy. And so I'll ask them, and if they eat 3 meals a day, then I just divide those 3 meals by the total number of protein that they need. If they need 150 grams of protein a day, then they're going to need to get 50 per meal. And then I show them how to obtain that, whether it's throwing a few more egg whites into an omelet, or adding the yogurt, or even a protein, a scoop of protein powder into a fruit shake. Then that would be sufficient.
But it has to be together in a meal to hit that, say, 50 grams with the right leucine threshold of 2.7 to 3 grams, I think I heard.
Yeah, generally speaking, with any animal source, you get north of 20 grams of protein, you're going to get the 3.5 grams or so of leucine that you need. With a vegetable source, you may have to do a little more, might have to go up about 20% more protein just to get the leucine threshold, unless they have, pea protein powders and others and soy protein powders that qualify, but we're back to the powders.
I was doing that one day. I was doing Chat GPT, putting it in, going, okay, if I need 50 grams of protein with the amino acids of this profile and with this much leucine, how many calories, how much serving? It's like 1,000 for quinoa. It was 1,000 calories. I had to get, so many cups. And I was trying to explain these infographics of protein for 30-gram proteins that are all out. And they always have 2 cups of black beans. I'm thinking, who's going to eat 2 cups of black beans? Who wants that? And so I just was laughing. I'm like, I'm going to just calculate this out and figure out how to make it work, because it's
there's a lot of people in the industry. There's some prominent vegetarian or vegan folks in the industry that I think give out good information, but I think it's hard to comply.
Yeah, I'm not against it. I'm just saying it's hard, really complicated to figure out the math to get that right magic dose to stimulate muscles.
Right.
So anyway, so we can learn a lot from you and your website. Do you want to give people where to head?
Stan Efferding. Yes, StanEfferding.com. Everything's there. At Stan Efferding's the Instagram, and on YouTube, I've got a lot of Rhinos rants that go back some 7-8 years, but they're really interesting. And that's Stan Efferding on YouTube.
Amazing. Well, thank you for following your passion and all that you're doing and continuing to do, especially helping the kids, because I think that's where it starts. Learning what to eat and a relationship with food at a young age is really, really big topic to dive into with families.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, my fellow aging endurance athletes, just a reminder, if you like what you listened to today, make sure to share this episode with your community. Head to debbiepotts.net to set up a free discovery call to learn more about my personalized coaching programs, especially if you are on a mission as myself to improve the aging process and start training to be my best self when I am 80, 90 years old. So I am on a mission to live my best life and be my best self the second half of my life. So if you're on the same mission as me, head over to my website and YouTube channel to learn more ways to improve the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Hopefully you enjoyed that interview, that conversation with Stan. I just wanted to finish up with a little information on the vertical diet, as I wanted to learn more myself. So it's accumulation of over 30 years of studying, researching, training, competing, coaching, and dieting to improve our body composition for optimal health and performance. And you've probably been following along for a while, but that's my goal as I get older, right? Hopefully you are on the same mission to improve the aging process and live my best life the second half of my life and thrive as I age, not struggle. And I think I always also feel that we need to stop blaming the aging process. I think it's an excuse. I'm getting older. I can't do something. And I think there's a lot of things we can do to take ownership of our health and be health optimizers by making these choices, doing things a little differently perhaps than we used to, especially as endurance athletes. Maybe you are not lifting weights, you're not doing sprint intervals, you're just focusing on more what we call chronic cardio and dealing with maybe some different chronic inflammation symptoms. So the vertical diet is something you might want to check out. It's interesting. It's a diet. I hate the word diet, but it's a food plan built upon solid foundation, highly bioavailable micronutrients to enhance metabolism and overall digestive health. This is the foundation approach of these micronutrients supports a structure of easily digestible macronutrients that can be adjusted specifically to meet your body's demands. Now, you can get all this on Stan's website. I'll put the link in the show notes. But the fundamental principles of the vertical diet can and should be used to improve and optimize any diet program. He talks about the vertical diet, what it's not. It's not magic. It's not some magical blend of macronutrient percentages. It's not some superfood or supplement protocol. It's not restriction or starvation diet, and it's not complicated. What it is what I love. Based on whole foods, based on optimizing gut health, which I'm all about as I do functional lab testing and seeing how dysfunctional our gut biome is, our microbiome. This vertical diet is based on correcting nutrient deficiencies, based on correcting hormone imbalances, based on improving energy, stamina, endurance, and recovery. It's based on improving health through sustainable lifestyle modifications. So this can be an effective tool for men, women, if you're trying to lose weight, weight loss, muscle gain, performance athletics, health optimization, and what we're talking a lot about each episode lately, kind of a theme right now, is reducing GI distress, gut stress. So the vertical diet can be customized to your individual needs, low carb, high carb, intermittent fasting, and it can be used by all ages. And I think they talk a lot. You don't need to be a bodybuilder. You don't need to be an amateur pro power lifter. You don't have to be CrossFit, but I think it can help us give some information. So it's 220 pages with 200 references. And it talks a lot about what I like to do in my health investigative packages is work on what I call the holistic method. And he talks about sleep, hydration, nutrition, digestion, blood testing, blood pressure, blood sugar, cardiovascular markers, strength, specific diet, and they have a quick start plan. So I just wanted to share that with you. I'm not promoting it. I just thought it was interesting, something you might want to check out. And I will find that stanefferding.com, products, vertical diet, peak performance, detailed program notes is the link. But Stan, he is a knowledgeable man. So he did study exercise science at University of Oregon, as he said, and has been training high school, collegiate, professional athletes for 25 years. And he's pretty dang buff and a strong man and smart at the same time. So hopefully you enjoyed listening to him and learning something new. He's got lots of ebooks and interesting information, his rhino rants on his website, but a vertical diet meal prep and some ebooks you can learn on his site. So I just thought it was interesting. So you might want to look at it. You can order meals if you want prepared meals. They ship them. I'm not a fan of microwaving, so I don't know if there's an option to cook them without microwaving, because I just think microwaving your food isn't ideal. Actually, we don't have a microwave. We got rid of it. And you can order a 10 meal box, 16 meal box, or 32 meal box, focusing on eating, training, and sleeping. And I think that's kind of what we've been talking a lot about, just putting it all together. So just wanted to throw that in there. Hopefully you are picking up some tips along this series of chronic inflammation, anti-aging, and how to get stronger and a healthier gut, your microbiome, as we talk a lot about that in the next few episodes. So I hope you're enjoying it. Let me know your questions.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.